Some of the absolute best horror, the kind that really gets under your skin, it's not about a jump scare. It's about this vast, cosmic dread. That feeling that we're just a tiny, fragile speck in a universe that doesn't care about us at all. Well, today we're going to look at the personal blueprints behind that feeling and see how one man's private nightmares became our collective horror story.
It's the big question, right? Are monsters these external things from some dark corner of the universe? Or are they born from somewhere a little closer to home? In this explainer, we're going to tear apart this idea that sometimes the scariest monsters are really just reflections of the people who dream them up.
So to do that, we're looking at the work of H.P. Lovecraft. But let's imagine him as a reclusive clockmaker, okay? A guy in a quiet little town, hunched over his work, staring at all these tiny gears that just never quite seemed to fit together. This was a man whose deep personal anxieties were basically transcribed word for word into his tales. We're about to see how his private demons became public nightmares.
All right, so let's start with the first, and maybe the most powerful of his fears, the fear of the other. And look, this wasn't just some vague uneasiness. This was a deep-seated prejudice that literally formed the foundation of his monsters. It was the dark ink he used to sketch out his entire universe.
Okay, so what's wild about this is how direct the translation is. It's almost a one-to-one copy. On the left, you've got his real-life xenophobia, this recorded fear he had of what he called low-born crowds, who he thought were ruining society. And on the right, that fear becomes the degraded and swarthy cults in his stories, the ones who worship these squamous or, scaly, alien gods. The line between them is crystal clear. In his world, being different literally meant you were doomed.
And this quote, man, it just nails it. This prejudice wasn't just a theme hiding in the background, it was the very substance of his writing. It's what gave his strange, old-fashioned adjectives so much weight. You could feel that they were soaked in a very real, very human kind of hate. So let's move to the next layer of his mind, because it just keeps building. Beyond his fear of others, Lovecraft was haunted by something way more personal, the absolute terror of losing his own sanity.
And this wasn't an abstract fear. It came from a really tragic family history. Both of his parents were lost to mental illness. So for him, it was this very real ghost that was always there, following him around his home. And in his stories, that becomes the central horror mechanic. Sanity isn't guaranteed. It's just a thin veil that can be ripped to shreds the moment you see or learn something you shouldn't. The monster isn't just trying to eat you, it's trying to break your mind.
You can even see it in the words he chose. Instead of just saying something was nightmarish, he'd pull out this dusty academic word like woneric. It's so clinical, so detached. And that choice, it tells you everything.
So here's the key takeaway. His famous writing style, super dense and academic, it wasn't just him trying to sound smart. It was a psychological fortress. It was like this stiff formal mask he wore to put some distance between himself and a terror that was deeply personal. It was his way of trying to keep his own hysteria locked away.
And from the mind, we move to the body. On top of everything else, he had this profound discomfort, this disgust, really, with the messy biological reality of just being human.
You can see this so clearly in his descriptions, right? He was physically frail, super sensitive to the cold, and that seems to come out in all these grotesque, wet, and clammy textures in his stories. All the slimy, pulsing, viscous monsters, it feels like a direct projection of his hatred for the biological world. He'd much rather describe things using words from math or geology.
This quote just perfectly captures his whole worldview. To Lovecraft, the body was basically a prison. It was this weak, soft, vulnerable container for a mind that really wished it could be part of the cold, clean, perfect logic of the cosmos. His monsters are the ultimate expression of that disgust with the flesh.
And finally, we get to the fear that ties all these other fears together. A deep, biting sense of failure and futility that came directly from his own life.
His life was just filled with disappointment. He had an unhappy marriage, he couldn't get his career going, and he always felt like an outsider who was ignored by the world. And he took all that personal bitterness and scaled it up to a cosmic level in his fiction. He created a universe that's all about existential futility, a place where gaining knowledge doesn't give you power, it just drives you insane. The smartest people in his stories are always the ones who suffer the most.
This is just such a perfect way to put it. Even his writing style, with those super long sentences that delay the reveal of the horror, it kind of mirrored his own long wait for any kind of recognition, which, by the way, only came after he died. His whole life felt like one closed door after another, and that feeling just bleeds into every bleak sentence he ever wrote.
So, After peeling back all these layers of fear, the social, the psychological, the physical, the existential, we finally get to the heart of it all. The monster was never really from outer space.
Let's just walk through the logic one more time. It all starts with one man's life, a life defined by this very specific, very intense set of private fears. Then he meticulously transcribed those phobias directly into his writing. And in doing that, he magnified his personal demons into these massive cosmic horrors for all of us to see.
And this is the core of the whole thing. The giant tentacled god sleeping under the ocean isn't just some alien. It's a mashup of one man's deepest anxieties about race, about sanity, about biology, and about his own miserable place in the universe. It's a monster born from the self.
Think of it this way. Every single fear we've talked about was a line on the blueprint for his most famous creation. His xenophobia, that was the foundation. His fear of going mad, that built the impossible crazy angles of the city. His hatred of the flesh, that's what filled the halls with slime and ooze. The entire city of R'yl was built from the architecture of his own dread.
And so, that famous call of Cthulhu starts to sound a little different, doesn't it? It's not just a psychic signal from some ancient creature. No, it's the psychic echo of that lonely clockmaker, a man who was deeply, truly terrified of the world around him. Which leaves us with one last, kind of unsettling thought. If one man's personal anxieties could build a universe of horror that's lasted this long, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What monsters are we building with our own fears, right now? What worlds are we creating?